Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Black Directory podcast. I'm your host, Diamond Young, and we have a very, very special guest today. This is a long time coming. You all don't know, but I know. She knows. We have Miss Laurel Rutledge here in the building. She's an entrepreneur, a coach, a speaker, a consultant, a radio and podcast host. She kind of does it all, basically. How are you?
I am great. I'm so excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, of course. Fun fact, we met at a podcast conference back in May 2022, if I'm not mistaken. It seems like a long time ago, but it's crazy because we realized that we both lived in Houston. So we were sitting at the same table. I went to this conference by myself. You know how that goes. You don't know if is it going to be awkward? Is it going to be weird? And I feel like I was welcomed with just so much love, and we just connected. Our whole table just really, we were going out to eat after. We were we were like, okay, this is cool. And it was just really nice to just meet someone in the podcast space. At this point, I didn't know anyone in the podcast space. Podcasting was still somewhat new to me, but I didn't realize what community really looked like when it comes to podcasting, and how it's not just now a podcast community. Now we can pour into each other beyond it, but it was cool to have that thing in common outside of both living in Houston. But how do you feel about when we first met? What do you remember from that time?
Man, it was so cool because it was the same thing. I went by myself as well. And when I got there and got to the hotel, I thought, okay, now I could just go home because I was flying from somewhere else. I'm like, do I really want to deal with this? And I thought, nope, you spent
Mm-hmm.
the money, just go ahead and go. And the same thing, I just sat down at a table and like, my introverted self, like, Laurel, you're here. You need to talk to people, see what people are doing. And the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
we sat at this table, we started talking, found out we were the same place, found out people were doing the same thing. Legina Ray, who's here and has her own radio show and stuff. And so it was just kind of
Mm-hmm.
not only a local connection, but as you said, just finding other people in this space that you just connected with. So it was amazing. I really got some great connections out of that I'm really excited about. That I'm so glad I went and decided to actually show up at the thing.
Same. It was so worth it. I think it was just so worth it. And yeah, we can talk for days about that. Just
Yes.
for one, the event being for Black podcasters,
Yes.
creating that space for us. And it was just incredible. So if any of you are listening and you're into podcasting, check it out. I'm not sure when their next one is happening, but I believe it's annual anyways. But it was just incredible. But it's crazy how you can meet someone and you don't know that they're going to be in your life. And I think that's,
Yes.
a gem that we kind of see shows up in life of like, oh, wow, like who would have thought by me
Right.
showing up here, I would connect with them in these other ways. And again, just kind of
Yeah.
start building your tribe and your support system and all that stuff. And we're going to get more into a tribe, but I want to
Yeah.
take everyone through your journey.
Sure.
Tell us what it is that you currently do. I know I named like
Okay.
seven things, but
Sure. Right. So right now, I am Laurel Rutledge, your chief navigation officer. And I finally, and I know we're going to talk about this whole timing and shift and coming into the thing that finally resonated is no, that's the thing. And it's being trademarked right now, as a matter of fact, because what I do is I help multi seven figure women owned businesses navigate that tipping point. So it's about 5 to 7 years and about 15 to 20 employees where they have to move away from being totally accessible all the time. You just can't do that and continue to run your business as a CEO. So I help them navigate that connection of their business strategy and their people strategy to ensure they're achieving their goals. And then the second piece of my business is working with new senior executives in corporate because I ran that gauntlet, right? I was one of only two African American women in senior executive positions in a global company of 17,000. So I know what it means to move there. And so, again, when you get to that senior role, it's not about what you know, it's not about what you've done, it's about how you navigate that space now in boardrooms with senior executives, with your teams. It is a whole new world, and you have to learn how to navigate that space. And so that's what I'm doing in that piece of my business beyond, like you said, the podcast, radio show, that kind of stuff. But those are the real kind of pieces where I'm trying to impact those women business
Mm-hmm.
owners, and then impact those folks who are new into that senior executive space. Because you can be great there, but it is a different world, and you can't always find the support you need inside your organization.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. I remember, just when I was working at Twitter, I was on the learning and development team. And one of the things I was responsible for was our coaching program. And at this point, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And we had a whole program for kind of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But I see the gaps now and I see how you fill a gap, right? So when I was there, we have these leaders where some of them, it was their first time really filling in certain shoes, whether it was a CEO,
Mm-hmm.
CFO, it didn't matter really like the level, it was a
Right.
range. And whether it was them really wanting to work on their executive presence or speaking, or there was going to be an acquisition, like the business
Mm-hmm.
changes, right? There's always new things that the business is going through. And you really need leaders just tapped in, like really in the right mind space. But we're all humans. So it's things
Yes.
where it's like imposter syndrome, all sorts of things that I'm
Oh,
sure
yes.
that they were going through. And we had to match them with all these coaches just around the world. And it was so interesting. It got to a point where we start having leaders that say, like, hey, I want a woman coach. I want
Yeah.
a coach that looks like me because it was everyone was looking alike.
Yes. Yes.
And I was like, oh, this is so interesting to me. So I got a little
Yeah.
taste from the outside of just, hey, leaders need help too. Leaders need
Yeah.
guidance as well. But what is it that made you feel like there's a gap and I know I can really help to connect that?
There were two things. So, one, in talking to my clients, especially those women business owners, for me, it's always about who you are, where you are, what you want, and what it takes to get there. Those are the four key foundational questions, right? And it's all about
Mm-hmm.
if you whether you're building a business or you're building a career, it all comes down to strategy and people, right? So, when what I found was in working with some of these business owners, those questions would come up about, wait, but I love my people and I really want to make sure that I'm available to them. But now my calendar is so
Mm,
crazy, I don't have time to do stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, then we need to fix that. Well, but then I've got 20 people, but I'm not sure they're in the right role and there's role clarity issues. I mean, it was the whole thing, right? And getting them to stop and get back to what are you trying to do? Like, who are you, the person that founded this business? And I call it the founders intensive, right? Who are you that
mm,
founded this business? What drove you, right? Who are you and where are you? And then what are you trying to do with that? And let's go back and get you grounded there again, and then get your people strategy connected to your overall business strategy, because it gets out of whack, right? Because we get really invested in those, especially those first few people, right? The bootstrap people with us.
yeah.
Not everybody can go with you to the next place, and you can't retain the same level of accessibility and the same level of connection when you've got 80, 90, 100 people as you did when you have five. And so getting their heads wrapped around, it's not that you're mean now, it's not that you don't care now, it is moving from emotion to compassion and being very strategic. So
Mm,
that's the first thing that happened. And then I started talking to people in these corporate spaces who were executives and getting questions and concerns, and here's the issue, and I don't know, how should I say this, and how should I. I'm like, yep, been there. Because they'll make you think you're crazy, and you're not crazy.
mhm,
But you do have to decide which battles you're going to fight, how you're going to fight them. You have to play chess and not checkers. You have to know when to call people on their crap and how to do it, because people will rewrite history in a minute and say, no, that's not what I meant, but that's what you said, right? And so it's that ability to in those senior levels to navigate the nuances, because that's what it is. It is,
yes.
how do I use my space? And especially as Black women, and then other people of color, it's all of the stuff, right? If you bow up against somebody, mad Black woman, she's just being emotional, all the stuff.
We have so much more to think about before we
Ooh,
even speak.
the
It's
mental
heavy.
gymnastics. Yes, before
It's
you even open your
heavy.
mouth. And so being able to create a space for people to,
Mm,
in a group setting, right, where these new senior executives can, one, find other group of people who are new too, And two, to really go through those same things. Who are you? You didn't change who you are just because you're now in a senior executive role. Let's get grounded in that again. Let's think about what your objectives are for this role and for your team, and let's create strategies around these situations that you're finding so that you're showing up in your power. And whatever that looks like for you, right? Because when you work with me, it's about no judgment. It's all about you. I am in place to serve you. So we're going to get you to where you need to be. Because my journey was different, just like everybody's journey is different, but my experience is the same, right? There are some common factors that I can help you work through because
Mhm.
I've been there. I've been there.
It's almost like growing pains. As you were speaking, that's what I kept thinking about. It's like when you mentioned how you can go from the bootstrap team, me and four or
Yep.
five other people, to just when it scales, right? We all want our business to
Yes.
scale. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
not knowing what that's really going to come with. And it can be really hard to, for one, a lot of people don't even have mentorship. Some people, that's what they're lacking.
Right.
It's like, who do I go to that's not going to
Mm-hmm.
judge me? Things like that. Everything that comes with that. Being
Yes.
vulnerable is another side of it. Even if you find a person to lean into, it's
Mm-hmm.
like being honest with, okay, like, hey, I don't know if I'm the best at this. I don't know if I'm really playing in my strengths. What do
Mm-hmm.
I do with that? So that's all I
Right.
kept thinking about as you were talking, is like, it's the growing pains. And it's like, with who I was as a leader in the beginning when it was 5, can I be the same person, or do I have to grow and like, is it going to change, and not feeling guilty about that? Have you seen that with clients where there's a sense of guilt
Yeah.
as it comes to,
Absolutely.
oh dang, I have less time to talk all day with this,
Yes.
person that, works for me or whatever. Like, what are you seeing? What are some common issues that you think leaders are kind of running into the most?
That's a big one. It's like I don't everybody wants a piece of me, right? Everybody wants time on my calendar, and getting to that place where you can recognize, one, you need to recognize your own energy sources, right? Because you only have so many resources, time, energy, money. You only have so much. And the one that is not renewable is time. And so
Mm,
you got to really be a good steward of your time. And so when I talk to people about, oh my gosh, everybody wants to be on my calendar, I don't have time on my calendar, it's about reframing the conversation. It's not that you're not available. That's what people are going to feel. They're going to feel like, oh, I can't get to her. You've got to really reframe it and say, you know what? Because of where we are in the business, there are some things that I need to focus on as the founder of this business. Because if the business is healthy, that means I can do more and more things, not only for the business, but for you. And so you'll see my calendar get less and less available because there's some things that I'm doing. You're not making any excuses. You're
mhm,
not justifying. You're not asking for permission. You are being as transparent as necessary to help people know that it's shifting. And then when you do have people on your
mm,
calendar, you are very cognizant of your time. Are you coming to talk to me because there's really something going on? Do I have decisions pushed at the right level? Because that's what I often find is people are not comfortable further in the organization of just making a decision, so everything gets pushed up. So a CEO or a founder or the next person down or the next person down, they're involved in the bowels of things that, had they taken the time, right, to train,
mhm.
to engage, to lift somebody up for their confidence to be able to do the thing, they could then lift up. So that's the whole conversation I have with them is, where should you be operating? And then how do we design your organization, including conversation, training, skill gap analysis, role clarity, so that everyone is
Mhm.
operating in their lane intentionally. And then when you dip down, it's awareness. You know you're dipping down. There's a reason you're dipping down, and it is intentional so you can pull back up. It doesn't become a habit where you just stay there. So it's really all about that comfort zone and that level of the executive, of that founder, to say, nope, I've got to operate differently. I am
You
running my
have to, like, it's
business.
no choice.
There's no choice,
Yeah.
right? And if I want the business to be healthy, I have to do something different. And then I need to bring my people along with me, but I also need to be okay that there are going to be some folks who aren't okay with that, and they just may not be with me long term. And I will love them as I help them be successful somewhere else, right?
That is a word. I feel like, just from what I've seen from the outside looking in, it's the decision making part that I think a lot of people get stuck on. It's like, again, as the businesses grow, the decisions become heavier, as it has more
Mm-hmm.
impact. Um, it's a delegation piece that you kind of were hinting at too. And I think we talked about this when I came on your show, like
Yes.
the power of delegation, but letting go. Sometimes you have that grip and you're just some people that could be their issue where it's like, hey, you really don't have the time to sit in all these meetings like
Yeah.
you used to and to be in the weeds
Yes.
and all the details of
Mm-hmm.
things. And I think that can
Yes.
be a hard place to navigate too, is
Yeah.
delegation, the idea of control and what that may look like when
Yeah.
you're needed and when you're like, you know what, they got it, and really empowering your team
Yeah.
to step in, because what happens is if you keep that control with you too long, your leaders, even people that are really qualified, they're going to start,
Yes.
by the time you need them to make a decision, they're going to be like, you sure? Or they're now
Right?
going to be second guessing their self.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh dang, when you really need them to step
Mm-hmm.
in and step up, it's going to be a transition. So I see why it's important to start that transition early when you first bring them on, and empowering them to feel good about, like, okay, hey, you know a lot about this business. I trust you. Lean
Yes.
into it. We can
Yes.
pivot later if we need to, course correct.
Yes. I tell people use the blood on the floor, bones sticking out. I'm like, if it's blood on the floor, bones sticking out, as the founder, you probably need to be involved. If it's not that, you can probably fix it, right? Give people a chance to show you their genius. And if something goes wrong, know that you're resilient enough to fix it. Now, you don't want to do something that's going to cost you $1 million or cost you 10 clients or whatever that thing is. That's
Mhm.
blood on the floor, bones sticking out, right? But if it's just something's delayed, or maybe it's not as fast or something, take a breath. Make sure you are being very clear with your expectations of people. Train them, do postmortems, right? Here's what I expected. And instead of saying, oh, that's wrong, especially if you're in creative spaces, say, help me understand how you got to that, because they may actually have some really great logic and you may be the one that changes, right? Your perspective is like, you know what, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead,
possible
right?
too.
Mm-hmm.
That's so
Mm-hmm.
possible
It's
too. And
trust.
it's so
Yeah.
collaborative. It's a trust thing. Because when
Yes.
people really feel like you trust them, they really get in their zone. Like they really
Oh
start to
yeah.
have fun with it. And that's what you want, ideally. You
Yeah.
want
It
people to
is.
feel like, okay, I can tap into my best self, my
Mm-hmm.
genius. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to switch gears for a bit. I know
Yeah.
we're on a path, but I want to talk more about you. And let's go
Sure.
back to when you were in corporate. What was that like?
Yeah.
What did you do? How long? Like, take us through that.
Yeah. Man, I was in corporate almost 30 years, right? So I came out of undergrad. My undergrad is in accounting. So I came out of undergrad and started in oil and gas as an accountant. And in hindsight, they hired five of us new in May, right out of school. And in October, they told us, oh, sorry, oil and gas business, we got to let all five of you guys go, but we want you to stay till April, right? So first job out of college, first layoff. Thought, oh my gosh, right? And then I ended up being in high tech and still doing some accounting, but more on the cost accounting side. And that's when I got into internal audit and really learned that I had a desire to think about logistics and how things moved and what really made things go through manufacturing. I mean, I just loved it. And then after my MBA, I went back into manufacturing at first and internal audit, which for those of you who are listening, if you're trying to figure out where you're going or if you're trying to move somewhere else, a great place to start in an organization is internal audit. Only because, and you don't necessarily
Mhm.
have to be a financial person, but it's because you get a chance to see the entire business and how it operates. Because good internal audit organizations are all about being internal consultants. That's what they do. Yeah, here's our processes. This doesn't seem to be working. Let's talk about how we could do that different, not only from a compliance perspective, from a speed, efficiency, all those kind of things. So I did internal audit. Then I wound up at Deloitte, which was awesome because that was right after the Enron debacle. And I know I'm dating myself, but that was right after Enron. I actually saw Enron happen downtown Houston, saw people walking out with their boxes. I was at Deloitte at the
Ooh.
time. And we had started, enterprise risk management. That was one of the things that came out of that, with Sarbanes-Oxley and all of that thing. And um, and it was fantastic. It was a fantastic opportunity. But after Enron and Anderson, I thought, I don't want to be a partner. And I was a senior manager. I'm like, I don't want to be a partner because you're in business with every
Mm.
other partner around the world in the firm.
True.
Yeah, no. And you have to buy in. I mean, there's
You're
multiple
like,
different things, right?
uh.
No. And there was just some cultural things around professional services at the time that just didn't sit well with me. And one thing about my journey is I've always been in a place where I've learned something new, and that's been great. But there's always been something that said, "It's time." Something, something started feeling wrong, and every time it happened, somebody came and asked me to go somewhere else. And so ended up going to a casket company, right? It was actually caskets and medical devices in Indiana, moved back to the Midwest, and was doing enterprise risk management, and then was asked by the head of HR for the casket company if I'd ever thought about HR. And I'm like, absolutely, let's do this. And so my first HR job was me supporting 900 people in 91 locations. I was supporting the
Ooh.
logistics organization. So I know what lean means, right? And it was still in manufacturing, and he is still a mentor of mine today. He's the most phenomenal human. And even through that, leaving there, going back to the medical device company, still kind of in HR, I just knew I needed to get home. And still stayed in HR for a while and in manufacturing. But then when I got to the senior ranks, I thought, I'm not conflict avoidant at all. You can't be in HR and be conflict avoidant. I'm not conflict avoidant at all. But I don't want to be in constant conflict. And there's some things
Mm.
that I can tolerate. I can tolerate challenges. I can tolerate gaps in knowledge. What I can't tolerate is lying. I can't tolerate lacks of integrity. I can't tolerate rewriting history and then telling everybody else they were wrong. I can't tolerate saying we want to hire people because they've got experience, and then when they get there, treating them like their experience doesn't matter and their career just started when they got in the door.
Ooh.
That I can't do.
Toxic
And
culture. That's what
so,
that is.
okay. And so I just decided this isn't for me. And at December 2016, I was looking around at my family. I had not slept on a Sunday in 5 years. I was traveling 80%. I'd agreed to 50. I was traveling 80%, both
Mm.
domestically and internationally. And I looked at my family in December, and I was just irritated that people were in the same room breathing my air. I mean, it was just, and I thought,
It was bad.
these are people I love, right? This is my mama. I am not, no,
Right.
no, 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 ma'am. This is not okay.
You
And
saw
that
it was
was when I
weighing on
said,
you.
I'm done. I'm done. Walked in that February to my boss and said, in Germany, and I said, I just need to let you know, we were getting ready to do my performance review, right? And I said, before we go there,
I
I
know
just
they
want
were
you to
not
know
expecting
I'm
that.
out. You've got till May, and I'm done. And that whole process actually ended up funding the start of my company because they panicked. They weren't paying attention. They wanted me to stay. And I'm like, I'm not staying. You can extend my departure date, but I'm not staying. I am leaving.
Right.
And they ended up just extending it till the end of December. And I was in. I mean, I said I'd stay till December. I was 100% in. I didn't sit on the beach till December. I was
Yeah.
in. We were doing a big project. I was, focused and making sure some things were happening, making sure there was good transition when I left. But it was time. I knew I could serve bigger. I could serve broader. I could continue to speak truth to power, but I could do it in more places. And that's kind of what led me to the entrepreneurship thing. It was just time. It was just time.
It was time. So you left, but did you know
Mhm.
exactly what it was that you were going to do, or you were like, okay, I'm going to kind of figure it out? What did that first 6 months look like post
Oh,
leaving?
honey, I left and I was like, I'm getting ready to start this business. March, we'll be up and running. This ain't no thing.
Ah,
And that was January 2019, 2018. 2019, I'm like, well, I'm not going back to corporate, but we got to figure this out. And I will tell you, it is now, I'm in now year 6. So thank you, Jesus. I have been able to keep this business moving with a
mhm,
lot of self-funding, right?
mhm.
For 6 years. And it was not until really 2022, kind of that year of 2022, when I did some things in 2022 that I said, this is it. And what is interesting that I want your listeners to think about is what I'm doing now is exactly what I said I was going to do in January 2018. When I did the first video for my
Mm.
website, I was like, it's 4 questions: who you are, where you are, what you want, and what it takes to get there. It is strategy and people, whether you're building a business or building a career, right? All of those things I said day one. Yet
Isn't that
I came out of
crazy?
corporate. right? I came out of corporate. And so while I had coaches, because I think every person needs some kind of mentoring coaches, I had coaches that were really phenomenal, but they'd been in the services space, never in corporate. So while we were saying some of the same words, we were meaning something completely different. So it gave space for me to allow other people's vision of what I should be doing, what services I should be delivering, to then become the new strategy without even really thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, 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 I need a product. Yeah, 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 I need to be doing, and I'm like,
I
no,
see.
no, now, finally, this is really it. So if you're a product person, great. If you come out of, your corporate space and you came out of HR and what you want to be is an HR consultant, that is probably easier and a quicker turn. That's not what I wanted to do. And so
Right.
if you are going to stay in the space you were in when you left corporate, one, get an attorney, make sure you're looking at your employment agreement so you're not going to run up against any kind of issues there until they completely disseminate, right, non-competes. Make sure you're not going to get
Yeah.
yourself in trouble. Get an attorney to look at that. But if you're doing that, then you're probably going to have a faster trajectory. If what your entrepreneurship journey desire is different than what you've been doing for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in corporate, that's a little bit longer of a play. And just be okay with that. Be okay with that.
No, and I love what you're saying because I think sometimes we think, okay, I'm making my leap. I have my plan. Some people already have it written out. This is the plan.
Yes.
But sometimes it's a few scenarios. Sometimes you do what you said you were going to do. And then it's like, oh, I'm either not happy or maybe I need more
Mm-hmm.
capital or something like it's
Right.
like a wall comes up where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I have to change course. Or you go
Mm-hmm.
down another path, like you said, people are going to throw suggestions at you. Even for me, like
Yes.
after they lay off, people are like, oh, do you do graphic design? Do you do websites? Do you do that? Because you may have touched things throughout time.
Yes.
But I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. I already know right now I'm not going to be happy doing
Right.
that.
Right.
Y'all are going to be happy, like whoever the
Mm-hmm.
customer is, but I'm not. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting. I think it's just important to give yourself that grace of have the plan, but create a little wiggle room. But don't forget,
Yes.
why, your purpose and why you're doing something, but know that it may not be like exact. What do you think?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, again, as you said, there's some people who are like crystal clear. And that's what I talk about. Get really clear on your vision, right?
Hmm.
But your clarity on the what is different than your clarity on the how. The how changes, right? Make sure your what is clean. The how will take care of itself. Because for example, yes, I come off as very extroverted, right? I got a radio show, I got a podcast, I got a show on Fireside, I got all these things. I'm out, I'm speaking, I'm doing stuff. I am introverted. I like being with just a few people or in my house. And
Hmm.
I knew because of when I started, remember my business started in 2018. The COVID hit, the Rona hit in 2020. And it's all
Yeah.
online and all of that. And I didn't have a picture on my LinkedIn. My only Facebook page was my personal page. I wasn't on Instagram at all. None of that. I just was not a social media person and I still don't love it. Right. I'm not, that's
Yeah.
not my jam. I do it because I need to. It's under duress at this point. But in 2019, I thought, you know what, Laurel, if you're really serious and you really want this business to work, you've got to be more visible. And I put down an intention in 2019. I'm going to be more visible in 2019. I got more intentional about my podcast because I started my podcast in 2018, right? But it didn't really take
Oh,
off. And yeah, it's been a long time. It didn't
I didn't
really take off.
realize how long you've had it. Okay.
Yeah. It didn't really take off until started in November 2018. Didn't really take off till 19. And I got really intentional and consistent in doing that. And then I went on a radio show. Somebody asked me to be on a radio show. And from that, I got offered to have my own show that I first said, oh, no, I don't know. Let me think about it. Everybody else was like, are you nuts? Of course you're going to do the radio show. So I put the intention out there, knowing what I needed to. And now the radio show is 3 years old. The podcast is going to be 4 years old, right? In November of this year.
Hmm.
I've got like more people on my email list. I've got people all over the world listening and tuning in because I
You
showed
do.
up,
Like a lot of
and it's
people, like,
amazing. Yeah,
because I
it's
forgot what your
incredible.
numbers are. You were talking about it at the conference during
Yeah.
one of those
So I tell
sessions.
you,
What's your listenership again?
So my listenership when I first did it was really low. Now on Listen Notes, I'm like in the top 10% on Listen Notes, a podcast globally. I just got a chartable all podcasts global reach. I'm like number 14,000 or something out of the
Yes, brag
millions and
on
millions, right? I'm like,
yourself.
woohoo, thank you, Lord. Right. And so
Yes,
it's
it's
coming. I just
beautiful.
hit 15,000 downloads on the podcast I just recorded. So
Yes.
it changes. And
So
I think,
exciting.
as you said, it is deciding what you want, and understanding how it may come to you and how you get there may be different, and giving yourself some grace. That's so important, that it may shift. It's important to know that
Mhm.
that's okay.
But that is so real, whether, if you're listening, whether you're on the corporate side or the entrepreneurship side, getting stuck on that how can have you stuck for a long time. Because I remember I just was like, but this isn't the route that I had written down. I thought I was going to
Yeah.
get there this way, like
Mm-hmm.
in this vehicle, that's this model and this color, and this car is supposed to take me from
Yes.
A to Z.
Mm-hmm.
And that pivoting is so important. And just knowing that as long as your destination is the same, like, if you feel like, no, this is for sure the destination,
Yes.
this is the purpose, it's what I'm meant to do, you have to really let yourself kind of go through the motions of the how. But as long as you're moving, then technically it's great. But I've had another guest, and y'all have said something similar in the sense of the things that you're doing now, it's not the things that you set out to do in the sense of speaking or like that kind of route, like, or that
Yes.
method to getting closer to your audience. And she was saying how she knew she liked events, so she was doing events. But as she would kind of kick off things and do the hosting, people were really gravitating when she would speak. So they wanted her to keep speaking. And they were like, oh, have you ever thought about writing a book? Like, when you tell your story here,
Yes.
and there was really good. And she's like, I never thought about writing a book. Or have you ever thought
Yes.
about speaking? It's like really people, it's interesting, that discernment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people will mention things and you have to kind of figure out what's something where you're
Yes.
like, is this confirmation? I keep hearing the same
Right.
thing. Or no, like I'm just not doing that. Like I hear y'all, but no. And it's crazy how by
Yes.
saying yes sometimes can bring you really closer to what you're trying to do. It's just not what you expected. Or it may be something that was out of
Yes.
your comfort zone, or it just wasn't on your
Yes.
bucket list. But it's like, oh, you know what? I'm glad I said yes to this.
Yes. And that old saying, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right? And so
Mm.
a friend of mine asked me to be on this radio show. She couldn't do it and somebody needed a guest, and I was like, "Sure." And
It
funny
was
story,
meant
I
to
mean, I was
be.
going to show up, right? I was like, "Oh, it's radio. I'll just put my t-shirt on, my jeans." And I
Yeah.
was like, "No. I've not met these people before." Walk into the studio. "Oh, by the way, there's a camera there. There's a camera there. We live stream." I'm like, "What?" What? And so luckily I was dressed up, I was nice, I was professional, I was, all these things. And because I showed up and decided to be prepared, right? I was
Mm-hmm.
ready. I was willing to be there. I said yes. The producer saw something in me based on what she was wanting to do with the studio and where she wanted the studio to go, that made her say, "You know what? I think I need you on the air." And so being able, even if your initial thing is, "Oh, I don't know," I had to go back and be reminded by someone else, "Laurel, you said you wanted to be more visible in 2019, and it's showing up. You're getting what you
Ooh, be
asked
careful
for.
what you ask for. It's like you don't
Be
know
careful what
the
you ask for."
how, but it's like, well, technically, this is still the
Yes.
thing. Like
Yes.
that's amazing. I love um, journeys and stories where it's like the timing, or it seems like something where when you said yes, you would have never thought all of this would come after. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this one
Never.
thing that one Tuesday or whatever day, and that was
Yes.
that. Like, so it's always so interesting when it's like it opens up this door where it's
Yes.
like, oh, this is my
Yes.
life. I'm
And
glad
the
I said
podcast was
yes.
just supposed to be visibility for the business, right? I wasn't talking about being a podcaster. I was just doing
That
that because I
part,
needed
right?
information out there to get other people to buy my other thing, right? That I didn't want to be really doing, but somebody else convinced me I needed to do, right? So I'm like,
Mm,
now I love it. Now I absolutely love it because I'm like you. I love hearing people's stories, right? What their journey is and how they got
mhm.
there. Yeah.
It's trusting the process. That's really what it is, and trusting that all roads are going to lead to where you're trying to go anyways, and being just
Yes.
okay with that.
Yes.
So for you, so far in your journey, what are you most proud of?
Oh, at the top of that list is that I am here 6 years in. I am here 6 years in, and it is not perfect. It's not even close to where I want it to be or where I know it will be. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
still here and I am still working and I'm still moving and I am clearer now on the people I need around me. Right. It's utilizing the skills that I have because you hear you got to scale, you got to scale, you got to build your business in a way that you can
Yeah.
scale. You got to have team. And if you're going to scale, you got to have team. And and I had to say, stop. Yes, if you want to scale, you got to have team because you're limited by the amount of time you can have. But team doesn't mean W-2. Team can mean
Yeah.
I'm going to hire other service providers, and that's going to be a contractual relationship. It works great.
The
It doesn't.
how.
We
That's
move
what we were
on,
talking about. The
right?
how.
It's the
Yeah.
how. And so I am most proud of being able to still be here and knowing it's like a switch flipped. Like I know that I know that I know that this is where I'm supposed to be and this piece of my business is going to make an impact. And I now know and have articulated and put it out in the universe, and it will not, if it doesn't happen, it won't be out of lack of trying. Is that my deep why is this $100 million foundation that I intend to build is going after K through 12 education. So part of my funding, part
Mm,
of my profits is going to fund that. And then I'm coming, Mackenzie Scott, I'm sending you a note, right? Bill and Melinda Gates, Amazon, and T-Mobile, and all y'all. We're going to build this
mm-hmm.
because we have got to do something about education because that is the great equalizer. And we got all this rhetoric about indoctrination with the 1619 project. The indoctrination is happening in K through 12 when people like Texas Education Association take over the schools in Harris County. We see you. We see you. Lewis County, Montrose County, we see that,
Right.
right? And so combating the narrative and combating the rhetoric is so important, and giving kids, regardless of socioeconomic status, and access to an exceptional free public K through 12 education. I feel like if I don't do something in that space, I have not done what God has put me on this earth
Mm,
to do. And so my first why, let me get these founders to where they are not writing big checks, that they are building the businesses that they love and having people around them that they love, and these executives, especially executives of color, that they are able to navigate those spaces. Let me do that. That's the stuff that I can do in my zone of genius. And then let me do that
mhm.
heart passion work, that social enterprise work, which is doing what I can to impact K through 12 education. And it took me till this time, right? That 5 years prepping to get to year number 6 to get good and clear and okay with that's what I'm going to do. And the people that need this are going to find me if I keep showing up and I'm committed.
Yes. Oh man, that is such a word. I love
Yeah.
that because it's like you have your goals and the things you're after that are like on the business side, but it's also like,
Yes.
how can I give impact that's beyond me, that's beyond the business? Like, what's the
Yes.
if I leave this earth, I want to make sure I do this. So I'm just so happy that, you shared that with us. I know you're going to reach that and do that. And I'm excited just to
Yes,
support.
Jesus.
So
Yeah.
before we go, I just want you to share with everyone, how can we support you? How
Mm.
can we find you?
Awesome. So you can find me on my website. So Laurel Rutledge, all one word.com. And it is going through a
Mhm.
refresh, but there's a pop up right now where you can get on my mailing list and you'll see everything there. And I'd love to have you on my mailing list for my weekly kind of emails and updates. And then the other thing that you can do is really support the podcast. Go download and listen to it. Listen to the radio show. That really does make a difference. And I want to hear from you. Right? If there's something you want me to talk about, send me a note. I'm on social. I'm either Laurel K Rutledge or I am the Rutledge Perspective on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of that. But again, you can get to me on my website. And then the last thing is to get to me if you know of a woman founder, multi seven figure business owner who's got that tipping point. um, Tell her to get on my website. Let's just set up a call. And if I'm not the right person, here's my commitment to all of you. If I'm not the right person, I'm okay with that because it's not about me, it's about you. And I've got a great network. So I can absolutely connect someone. So know that if you're referring someone to me and it's not a fit, I will make sure to do what's in my power as a servant leader to get them to someone who is. So if you know that person who needs that, I am the chief navigation officer and I can help you get there with love and support and with truth. And then if you are a senior executive, new to the senior executive ranks, we're going to be starting that group session here soon. So just connect with me, get on my mailing list, and that's the easiest way. laurelrutledge.com.
Yes, and that's why she is amazing. As you guys can see, she has such a, it's genuine, it's sincere. It's not, hey, give me your money, let's go. Which, hey, I'm all for people getting to the bag, but
Right?
it's just cool when you
Yeah.
can feel it and you can sense of like, oh wow, like when someone's really truly aligned, they're in alignment, they
Yes.
found their purpose and they're doing the work that they feel
Mhm.
led to do. So I'm
Mhm.
just so happy that we had some time today and that you were able to just kind of bring us into your world and share and
Yes.
just take us on that journey of how you got to where you are and just the impact that you're making. And it's amazing work and it's so necessary and it's so needed. So thank you so much for being on the Black Directory podcast. And I already know we're going to talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast, and we absolutely have to do it again.
We will. We definitely will. Thank you.